The first time my mother called me selfish, I laughed. Actually laughed. 'Cause I thought she was joking. After everything I had done. After 10 years of sending money home. After sacrificing my 20s. After choosing them over myself again and again. Selfish. My name is Angel. And this is the story of how the child who carried everyone almost disappeared. When my father died, the house changed overnight. It wasn't just the silence. It was the fear. Bills started arriving faster than condolences. My younger brother, David, was 17, still preparing for exams, still dreaming about university, still believing life would be kind. I remember the night my mother sat on the edge of her bed and said quietly, "Angel, we will manage." But I could see it in her eyes. She didn't believe it. And neither did I. 2 months later I left for Lagos. 1 bag, 2 pairs of shoes, and a promise to myself that my family would not sink. Lagos was not gentle. The room I rented had cracked walls and one small window that refused to close properly. When it rained, we used buckets. When there was no light, we used candles. But every month before I paid my own rent, I sent money home. School fees, food money, electricity. My mother would call and say, "God will bless you." David would say, "Sis, one day I'll make you proud." And I believed him. I believed in that future so strongly that I forgot to build my own. Years passed. I moved from supermarket sales to a small accounting firm. Better pay, longer hours, still no savings. Because every time I tried to save, something happened. David needed a laptop. My mother's blood pressure increased. Roof leakage at home. Graduation fees. PSC registration. Rent increase. Emergencies do not wait for your personal goals. And in our family, I was the emergency plan. When David graduated from university, the entire village celebrated him. They called him intelligent. They praised my mother. They said, "You raised a strong son." I stood in the background and smiled. Nobody asked how he got there. And I didn't speak. Because I didn't need applause. I needed peace. Or so I thought. After David got a job in Abuja. He sounded different on the phone. More confident. More independent. "Sis, I want to build something. I'm tired of renting." I had been saving small money for myself. Just small. But I sent it to him. We bought land. The papers were in his name. The lawyer looked at me twice. He nodded. "It's family," I said. That was my favorite sentence. It's family. The house slowly came up. Each time he sent me pictures, I felt proud. Not because it was mine, but because I helped create stability. When he moved in, he called me and said, "Sis, you must come for the housewarming." I went. People praised him. They called him responsible. I smiled quietly. That smile would later cost me. Then he met Lacey. Beautiful, educated, sharp. The kind of woman who understands how to reposition herself in any room. At first she treated me warmly. But I noticed something small. Whenever I advised David about money, she would say gently, "Let him decide. He's a man now." It wasn't disrespect, but it was a shift. I ignored it, because I believed love didn't compete. Then something happened that changed everything. My company downsized. One meeting, one envelope, and 10 years of sacrifice collapsed in 15 minutes. I didn't tell anyone. Not my mother. Not David. I used my savings. Applied for jobs quietly. Pretended strength. But strength has limits. 3 months later, I was drowning silently. So I called David. He didn't hesitate. "Sis, come stay with us for a while." Relief washed over me. Family. Finally I could breathe. The first week was peaceful. I cooked, cleaned, woke up early, went for interviews. I tried not to feel like a burden. But slowly, I started noticing changes. Lacey counted groceries. Mentioned electricity bills. Asked softly, "How long do you think you'll stay?" I laughed it off. But my chest tightened each time. One evening, I overheard something I was never meant to hear. Lacey said, We're married now. This is not healthy. David replied. She won't stay forever. As if I was a temporary guest. In a house I helped build. A week later, David called me to sit down. He avoided my eyes. Sis, we need our space. I felt something crack inside me. I built this space too, I said quietly. He sighed. You chose to help me. I didn't force you. The sentence landed like a slap. Chose. In that moment I realized something painful. Sacrifice feels permanent to the giver. Optional to the receiver. Packed that night. No shouting. No drama. Before leaving I said softly. Helping you was never the mistake. Forgetting myself was. And I walked out. I thought that was the worst part. I was wrong. Because 3 months later, my mother called. And that was when she said the word. Selfish. My mother's voice was sharp that day. Angel, what is this I'm hearing? I was confused. What did you hear? They said you left David's house because you didn't want to support him anymore. Froze. Who said that? People are talking. They said you've changed. That Lagos has spoiled you. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I didn't know how else to react. I was the one who was asked to leave. Silence. Then my mother said something that cut deeper than David's words. Maybe you were too controlling. That was the first time I felt alone. Truly alone. When my mother said I was controlling. Just quiet. Controlling. I repeated. Yes, she said. People say you always remind David of what you did for him. I couldn't breathe for a second. I never reminded him, I said softly. Not once. But my mother didn't sound convinced. Sometimes, she continued, when you help too much, you make others feel small. That sentence stayed with me long after the call ended. Make others feel small. Was that what I did? Was that who I became? That night I didn't sleep. I lay on my thin mattress staring at the ceiling fan that barely moved. And for the first time in 10 years, questioned everything. Had I overstepped? Had my help been suffocating? Had my love been heavy? Because here was the truth nobody prepared me for. When you carry people for too long, they forget how to walk beside you. And when they finally learn to walk, they want distance from the one who carried them. 2 weeks later I heard the full story. Through a cousin. Lacey had been telling people that I left Abuja because I was uncomfortable sharing space. That I felt superior. That I didn't respect her marriage. And David, he didn't correct it. He allowed the story to live. I didn't call him. I didn't defend myself. For once in my life, I let silence protect me. But the silence hurt. Not because of gossip, but because of realization. I was not part of their future anymore. I was part of their past. The stepping stone. The bridge. And bridges are meant to be walked over. Not appreciated. Months passed. I rebuilt slowly. Small freelance contracts turned into stable clients. I moved from shared accommodation into a tiny studio apartment. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. Every spoon, every plate, every curtain. No one could ask me how long I planned to stay. One evening David called again. His voice sounded tired. Not proud. Not confident. Just tired. Sis, he began. Are you okay? I'm fine, I replied. There was a long pause. Then he said something unexpected. Things are not easy. I didn't rush to ask what he meant. 'Cause for once, it was not my responsibility to rescue. He continued. Work is stressful. Lacey and I argue a lot. I stayed quiet. He cleared his throat. Sometimes I think we rush things. And in that moment I understood something powerful. Life was teaching him lessons I could never explain. Do you regret asking me to leave? I asked calmly. Silence. Then a sigh. I didn't think you would actually leave. I almost smiled. So what did you think would happen? I thought you would fight. That was it. He expected resistance. He expected emotional bargaining. He expected me to remind him of what I did. He expected me to stay. 'Cause I always stayed. But this time, chose myself. After that call, something shifted inside me permanently. Just clarity. I was no longer the emergency plan. I was no longer the silent investor. I was no longer the second mother. I was Angel. And for the first time in my life, that felt enough. Then the final blow came. 6 months later, my mother fell sick again. Nothing too serious, but enough to need hospital attention. And guess who she called first? Not David. Me. I paid the hospital bill. Transferred the money quietly. Just to help. Because helping was never the problem. Overgiving was. A week later I went home to visit. The village hadn't changed. But I had. Women whispered when I passed. Some greeted warmly. Some with curiosity. My mother hugged me longer than usual. But there was something unsettled in her eyes. That evening while we sat outside she said softly, "Angel, did we push you away?" I didn't answer immediately. Because honesty requires courage. Finally I said, "You didn't push me away. You just forgot what it cost me to stay." She looked down. And for the first time, I saw guilt. Later that night, David arrived unexpectedly. He looked thinner, less confident. When he saw me he hesitated. Then he sat down quietly. We didn't speak for a few minutes. Finally he said, "I've been thinking about everything." Waited. "You were never controlling." Silence. "I was insecure." That was the first honest thing he had said in years. He continued, "When I got married I felt small. Like I was still living under your shadow." Shadow. That word made me pause. "I never wanted you to feel small," I said gently. "I know," he replied. "But I did." And there it was. The real problem had never been my sacrifice. It had been his insecurity. For the first time in our adult lives, we spoke like equals. Not benefactor and beneficiary. Not rescuer and rescued. Just brother and sister. He apologized. Not dramatically. Not publicly. But sincerely. And something inside me softened. Not enough to forget. But enough to release. The next morning before I left the village, my mother held my hand and said, "You carried too much." I smiled gently. "And now I don't." That was the difference. I still loved them. I still cared. But I no longer carried. Today David and I talk regularly. He doesn't ask for money. I don't offer unnecessarily. We respect each other's space. And that space saved our relationship. 'Cause sometimes, distance protects what closeness almost destroys. If you are the strong one in your family, listen carefully. You can love deeply. You can help generously. But never build someone else's life so completely that you forget to build your own. Because one day when you finally stop carrying everyone, you will discover something beautiful. You were never just the pillar. You were the foundation. And foundations do not beg to be recognized. They simply stand. And that was the day I stopped being the family's safety net and started being my own. 3 years passed. 3 quiet, steady years. My freelance work turned into a small accounting consultancy. Not big, not flashy, but stable. I moved into a better apartment, bought my first car, started sleeping peacefully. For the first time in my life, my money stayed with me long enough to grow. And something else grew too. My confidence. David and I spoke often. Short calls. Normal conversations. He and Lacey were still married. But I could hear something had changed. Not love. Not commitment. Power. The dynamic had shifted. He was learning to stand on his own without comparing himself to me. And I was learning to care without carrying. Then one evening he called me unexpectedly. His voice was heavy. "Sis, are you busy?" "No," I said. There was silence. Then he said something I never expected. "Lacey and I are separating." He sighed. She said she felt like she was competing with a ghost. "A ghost? You," he said softly. Closed my eyes. He continued. "She always felt I measured myself against you. That no matter what I achieved, I compared it to what you did for me. That was painful to hear. Not because it was my fault, but because it showed how deeply insecurity can poison relationships. I never wanted to be competition, I said quietly. I know, he replied. But I made you one. He told me things I didn't know. How he had rushed decisions to prove independence. How he had pushed me away to feel bigger. How pride had whispered lies into his ear. And how peace had slowly left his home. We built a house, he said. But we didn't build maturity. That sentence stayed with me. A few months later, I attended a small family gathering in the village. Nothing dramatic. Just a birthday celebration for my mother. David came alone. He looked calmer. Less defensive. When we sat outside that evening, he said something that felt like closure. I spent years trying to stand taller than you. I looked at him. He continued. But I never realized you were never standing over me. You were just standing beside me. That was the apology I needed. Understanding. My mother, older now, held both our hands that night. She said softly, "You children taught me something. That helping too much can create distance. And pushing away help can create regret." We all laughed lightly, but we understood the truth inside it. Life did not become perfect after that, but it became balanced. David rebuilt his confidence, started a small business, struggled, adjusted, learned, without asking me to rescue him. And I supported him emotionally, not financially. And that difference changed everything. One afternoon years later, he visited my office. Small but professional. Glass door. My name on the wall. He stood there quietly looking around. "You built this yourself," he said. "Yes," I replied. He nodded. "I'm proud of you." And this time, felt complete. Because it was not spoken from guilt. It was spoken from growth. As for me, I finally started dating seriously. Not because I needed someone to complete me, but because I was no longer exhausted from carrying everyone. I had energy for myself. Dreams for myself, plans for myself, and I realized something important. When you stop being everyone's emergency plan, you finally become your own future. Looking back now, I don't regret helping David. I don't regret the money. I don't regret the sacrifice. What I regret was believing love required self-erasure. 'Cause it doesn't. Love should not cost you your identity. Family should not cost you your stability. Sacrifice should not cost you your peace. If you are the strong one in your family, listen carefully. You can help. You can give. You can support. But you must also build yourself. Because one day, when everyone stands on their own, you should not be left standing empty. David once told me something that stayed with me. I didn't realize you were human. I thought you were unbreakable. And that is the danger of always being strong. People forget you are human. Until you finally choose yourself. Today we are not perfect. But we are healthy. He walks beside me. Not behind me. Not under me. Beside me. And that is enough. If you have ever been the backbone. If you have ever carried silently. If you have ever felt forgotten after giving your best. Let this story remind you. You are allowed to love deeply. But you are also allowed to love yourself. And sometimes, the greatest gift you can give your family is teaching them how to stand without leaning on you.